and today I'll be talking about discovering my ID through ID. So the first ID stands for identity, and the second one stands for industrial design. So I want to be talking about how, coming from a more technical background in mechanical engineering, I kind of found my path in design to kind of create different products, as well as kind of understanding how different academic approaches to design come from more technical engineering background as well as design courses, and how kind of this combined with my experiences transformed a different path for me in design. So I kind of want to start by walking through my design journey at Cal. So before I came, around 2013, I watched a 60 Minutes interview by David Kelly, and I first kind of got introduced to design thinking and human-centered design. And I think this quote by Tim Brown really explains human-centered design in terms of starting with the people and then creating new solutions for them. And when I came into Cal, I kind of wanted to surround myself with design, so I took courses in art history and architecture and engineering, and I studied abroad and I learned about entrepreneurship and technology. And then I joined Berkeley Innovation, which some of us here are in, and we're a human-centered design consulting organization, so kind of what IDEO does, but at a very, very small scale, working with different clients in the Bay Area on design projects. So this is kind of my first kind of tiptoe into the world of design. And then my second year, I wanted to learn more technical skills, so I joined the web design decal where I learned a lot from Canva, as well as I joined the design exchange, which is one of the research projects in Berkeley, and I got to really understand in depth different design methodologies that professionals as well as researchers use. And I'll be kind of combining all of this, working on both digital and physical interaction design for autonomous vehicles this summer. So kind of through all these experiences, both in class as well as extracurriculars, I've really learned a lot about design, specifically coming from my technical point of view. The first thing is in the initial research stages, I really understand the importance of finding a non-obvious need. Most times you're kind of taught in the design world to come up with personas, you go to interviews, but you don't really get a large scale of methods to use. So in one of my first projects in BI, I worked on using a lot of different types of research, so this is kind of a snapshot. But there's surveys, contextual observations. We were creating an automated breakfast eatery, so we actually went on the bar at like 7 a.m. and we bothered all these commuters asking about their morning experience and how breakfast kind of fit in. And then we went to affinity mapping to kind of gather all these insights. So with another project called PODO, we worked on a stick and shoot camera, and kind of after combining all these insights, we came up with these 4 personas, which is like the typical way that you approach design. But this semester I had an opportunity to have lunch with Barry Katz, who's a fellow at IDEO, and he kind of gave me a different methodology of approaching. So usually personas are like your main people in the middle of your spectrum, but he said at IDEO they kind of focus on the extreme users, which I thought was a very different point of view. So by targeting people with disabilities, targeting people with limited wire connectivity, you're really able to kind of encapsulate all the needs of everyone in between by focusing on its extreme users. So this is kind of the differentiation I saw between my teachings in design at Berkeley and then actually talking to industry professionals and also with my own experiences in design. So a little bit about what I do at the Design Exchange. So it's an online interactive portal for designers and researchers. So it's in its initial stages. But we're working with MIT as well as Berkeley to kind of create a design curriculum. I'm actually using it for some of the courses, such as the Mechanical Engineering 110 course, as kind of a textbook. And we basically write different methodology, from instructions to limitations to how to use different methods. So it's not as aesthetically pleasing as it could be, but it's full of content right now, and we're kind of working on transitioning it into a more usable website. And I just, throughout all my experiences, I've realized that you have to use a variety of methods to really find those extreme users, as Barry Katz told me. So these are some of them, like diary studies, card sorting, user-created collages. Most people kind of immediately draw themselves towards interviewing people and then just observing, and then that's it. But I think there's such a wide range of methodology that we could be using and we should be using to really dig deep and find the more extreme personas. So kind of next step is kind of who is your team? I think I usually approach design as a decision-making process because you really have to keep all the different stakeholders in mind. And people usually don't have the answers. So when I'm in all my technical courses, the professors are always, when you're doing a design project, you just have to optimize. There's like a set of constraints and then you have to meet them. So you're either correct or you're incorrect. But with my design experiences, I realized that it's more gray, it's not as black and white as it seems. And you kind of have to keep like all the stakeholders in mind when you're creating a design. So there's never a correct solution, it's just what is the best solution for your user. And I really learned like, the value of multidisciplinary teamwork. I've worked in teams of all mechanical engineers, and I've worked with teams with cognitive science majors and visual designers. And it's so nice to see how different people approach the same problem. And I love working with more interdisciplinary teams than my full mechanical engineering teams. This is an example of the original V-Box project that I talked about before. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can kind of see how all the different members of my team approached the brainstorming sessions. So this one, Marissa, who works on food systems, she kind of looked at it as a more spatial diagram of how people interact with a certain object. I, at the top, kind of look at the orthographic front, side, back projections that you're taught in mechanical engineering. And Kate and Jess work on UI UX, so they think about very like user flows. So they approach that same user flow idea into physical design, creating more of a storyboard instead of directly going into the visuals of how a physical product would look. And kind of putting together all the different ways that people approach something new to them or physical design was really intriguing, and it really helped us kind of bridge a new path for us when we were creating this project. And it kind of translates into the workforce because you do have to work with both business people and tech people with your project managers to kind of create a full product at the end. So as I was talking about before, design is a series of decision making, and usually the way you approach design is diverging and converging. But how do you know when to keep going? How do you know when to stop? When to come up with more ideas, or when to stick to the ideas that you have? So one limitation I think with more engineering and more technical studies is that they're all about numbers. So this is how they present decision making in my technical design courses, as literally just assigning numbers. But there's a certain point where you don't know how does this number represent my idea, and it's not even intuitive, but it doesn't make the decision making process fun at all. This is like a decision matrix. And I think just through my work at the Design Exchange, I've realized there's so many different methods for creating decisions and understanding different aspects, working on touch point matrices, really understanding how the user works with this. And this diagram, which is very popular from IDEO, really shows design innovation at the center of technology, business, and human values. And I really think that it's important for designers to be the advocate for the users. So when different people with different backgrounds come to you and ask you why you made a certain decision, you have to kind of back it up with your user research and be the advocate for the usability of your product. And then kind of moving on to the prototyping stage, I find that it's really hard to develop an idea without failing well first. You can't really make a decision until you know if it's going to work or not, and I feel like a lot of times in technical courses, they tell you to choose an idea, and if it doesn't work, just hack it together and debug it until it works. But at the end, you don't really have a product that's the most usable for a user. It just works, but it might not work well. And my favorite thing to do is kind of hacking together prototypes. So more than actual tedious building of prototypes, I like coming up with a creative way and a cheap way to build things with cardboard, or putting together random, basically trash supplies into something that shows proof of concept. And I really like this quote from David Kelly: "Picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings." Because there's only a certain amount that 2D images, even a 3D model, can see, because you really can't understand that 3D point of view, and actually having a tangible thing you can feel or interact with really gives a lot more in usability studies than anything else. So this is one of my initial projects. You can kind of see my timeline of how my design has evolved, but we worked on a business card holder for my design class. And at the top, we took cardboard and just made an accordion style with a lanyard. It was very pretty jank. But at the bottom, after many rounds of 3D modeling and 3D printing, we came up with a more sleek concept with magnets to hold it up. And then this is for the photo project, which was a stick and shoot camera. We came up with a really bulky idea on the top. We showed the usability of the flexible strap with a scored laser cut wristband, and we ended up with the bottom model. So you can kind of see how it went from sketch to the actual different iteration process for the physical band. And I think the project that really most encapsulates all the learnings that I've gotten from my prototyping is my V-Box project. So the best way to really show our client what the project looked like was by building a 3D model and giving the client an opportunity to interact with it and move it around in a 3D space. And then after getting feedback, we were able to build a huge, like 8-foot by 10-foot cardboard prototype that you can see on the top right. And we realized that the idea really wasn't feasible and there were a lot of issues. So we had the opportunity to completely pivot into the second idea with more of a turntable setup. And then we focused on just building 2 shelves that really show this interaction better than actually creating a full 8 by 10-foot prototype. So we kind of hacked together the top one and then used our learnings to create a more refined prototype at the bottom. These are just some of the methods that I've been working on in the design exchange. And I kind of wanted to go through some things that I've learned specifically for different types of design. So for UI UX, I really feel like it's important to start with a paper prototype. You can draw it, you can have it really easily interactable and easy to use or test. And then going from there, you can use an app like Pop by Marvel, or paper prototyping, where you can create a clickable prototype by just taking photos of your paper prototype. And then after getting all this feedback from this, you're able to like go on Figma, go on Sketch, and actually create a more high fidelity model. So I found that this path is like the best for UI UX prototyping. So for service and experience design, the top is actually check-in process of a hotel. You can really see how they use the cardboard boxes to create a visual hierarchy, and it's literally just put together like very sketchily, but it really gets the point across. At the bottom, it was a test for a hospital experience with nurses and friends arriving, and we literally just had a bed and a table, and we had different timings, and we kind of made a skit to show how the interactions would work. And then for physical prototyping, I really like this example. This is like a coffee setup, so you have your sugar packets, you have your cups, you have the lids. It's like a really simple prototype that had no color, no specific form, but just to kind of be a proof of concept. And different ways to build this that I've learned is laser cutting is really easy. You get all the materials, and you're really able to test the usability of it and test the actual motion. So you can see these really cool examples of just testing the motion with the laser cutter to see is this product even viable. The train runs pretty cool. And then another thing that I worked on, especially like you saw from the V-Box presentation, was actually 3D modeling. This is my favorite program, which is Autodesk Fusion 360, which lets you actually mold more amorphous shapes. And then going from that into a more 3D printer is a really good way to create a tangible prototype. And so I'm kind of putting this all together. I've taken a lot of courses, I've done research in design, as well as been part of organizations. So I kind of wanted to create a little chart that navigates design at Cal. It's a little bit crazy, but on the top there's all the courses that I've taken or know about, the community on the right, as well as the organization. And then I've noticed a lot of organizations teach courses through the decal program, and Jacobs creates for the course in the community. So I thought this was really helpful for me to kind of understand where all my different influences in design have been, and I'm kind of the intersection in the middle. And that's it. These are some of my final thoughts. Thank you so much.